Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, in the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful. So, hello everyone. Welcome to another lecture. I feel sorry, I don't know if you guys hear it. There's a train passing by. Should have probably waited for that. Alright guys, while I'm gonna wait for this train to pass by, I'm gonna put you in the mood by playing an Attack on Titan soundtrack. The train finished. Alright. Okay. Okay. Seriously, let's get to the lecture. Thanks everyone, or whoever's attending. All right. Today's lecture, even though I'm stalling a little, but today's lecture is a very important one. It is a question that occurred to me that I wondered why it hadn't so far. Right? And in this week, I have been truly wondering about the depth of what emotions mean. I even took it as far as like thinking, if I was a robot, how would I learn emotions? So, it occurred to me that in any moment I have been emotional, in some sense, was that emotion based on my current sense of self? Or was it based on a past sense of self? And what is actually going on with the human intelligence in regards to how our emotions come about? So I've, in these lectures, spoken about objective reality. I've spoken about subjective reality. Now I'm speaking about emotional reality, which seems to be a very unique relationship in what's happening in the brain. Now, for this lecture, there's a research component. I'm going to get through that first. All right, so I'm going to read for the viewers something, okay? It's pretty much, I'm going to read for you just the end summary of it, and then later on I'm going to read the whole thing. But it says in simpler terms, when someone is being emotional, their brain is reactivating a past emotional response to a present situation, blending past identity states with current perception, while reducing the brain's capacity to rationally separate then from now. So this is a very important idea, folks. And pretty much this lecture is, have you wondered if your emotions are from your present self or past self? Like, that's the title. But the mystery of the question is wondering about the role of emotions in the human experience. And even though there's an explanation here, I have my own view on this, okay? My own observations. And I don't know, maybe I should read the academic thing first and then go into my own explanation. So guys, I'm going to read it for you. This is AI generated ChatGPT 4.0. It's Saturday, June 21st, 8:06 p.m. I'm in Toronto, Canada. I was born December 17, 1991 at 9 a.m. And anyways, I'm going to read this. The self, emotions, and temporal identity layers. So this is kind of like an essay AI has generated. It's called The Origins of Emotion and the Multiplicity of the Self, an Interdisciplinary Synthesis. Abstract. This paper explores the question of whether emotions belong to the present self or are echoes from past selves. Analyzing the nature of identity and effect from neuroscientific, psychological, and philosophical perspectives. Drawing on internal family systems theory, constructivist neuroscience, and contemporary philosophy of mind, we argue that the self is a dynamic multiplicity shaped by emotionally encoded experiences across time. Emotions, while experienced in the present, are often triggered patterns originating in past versions of the self. The, in quotations, true self, if it exists, is not a fixed identity, but a conscious witness behind the flux of sub-selves and affective states. Very on point here, guys. Very on point. Even though it says, if it exists, it's not a fixed identity, but a conscious witness behind the flux of sub-selves and affective states. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're in the human experience. You identify as a human, but what your true self is an awareness to all these sub-selves that you've tunneled through so far. Okay, anyways, I'm going to keep reading. Introduction. Modern introspective individuals often encounter the feeling that their emotional responses do not entirely belong to the self they identify with in the present. Wow, guys, this could have been, I could have written in the title actually better. This observation invites deeper inquiry into the origin of emotions and the continuity, in brackets, or multiplicity of the self across time. So this is very important, you know, because we're pretty much saying that you're identifying with a sense of self right now, but the emotions that this sense of self has may not be from this sense of self. This is so important for those who want to even understand the psychology behind self-sabotage, wondering about the influence of the subconscious, wondering about, I guess to some degree, Freudian theory of how our childhood is affecting us now. And in some sense, could we have had emotions from senses of self that we were not conscious of them, but in some sense the emotions somehow happened? Okay, I'll give you an example. It's like right now you don't identify with the children in Gaza, right? But anytime we see human beings dying, like, you know, or human beings in some sense, messed up things happening to human beings, we all get a feeling from it. Okay? And that feeling is not from our sense of self. That means if you see someone, let's say in a fight, when I was young, in middle school, I have a twin brother, and he would get into more fights than me, but to be in a fight was always part of it. I'm trying to say, as someone who is actually a twin, like physically I have a twin brother, we were born at the same time. I can fathom the emotions of another self, even though myself is identifying with a different set of emotions. Okay? So guys, this whole lecture here, like the reason you're actually maybe subconsciously, like why this topic is interesting, is because we're trying to figure out the mystery of, are our feelings from the self we identify as? What is the role of that? You know, I'm very excited about this, is because my own theories, I'm a futurist at heart. But anyways, I want to keep reading this. Introduction. I read this before, I'm going to read it again for you. Modern introspective individuals often encounter the feeling that their emotional responses do not entirely belong to the, in quotation, self they identify with in the present. This observation invites deeper inquiry into the origin of emotions and the continuity or multiplicity of the self across time. 2. The self as a construct, neuroscientific view. Contemporary neuroscience, particularly in the constructivist tradition, suggests that the self is not a stable entity, but an emergent process of the brain's memory, prediction, and narrative functions. As Antonio Damasio and others posit, the sense of self is largely built through the integration of autobiographical memory and affective tagging, creating an illusion of a continuous I, in quotations. Emotions are not fresh responses, but reconstructed experiences based on emotional memory and stored neural templates. That means how many people on Earth right now, I mean, just to dive into a part of this, how many people on Earth right now can say that they are, this is very deep question for me personally, like feel free to answer, but how many people are identifying with a template? Like, you know how when you go on wix.com and you want to build a website or something, it has templates, or canva.com, like you know, they have templates. Similarly, right now it occurred to me, how many human beings are actually functioning under a template, and that template is not original to them. You know, I can understand this when it comes to, for example, clothing and style, but this notion of what is original style, do you know? And what part of that originality is like a Venn diagram, or do you know what I mean? Where based on the past and the present, you know? Anyways, let's keep going. 3, internal family systems, IFS, and emotional subpersonalities. Internal family systems, IFS, a modern psychotherapeutic model, posits that the mind is composed of parts, semi-autonomous emotional subpersonalities formed through developmental experiences. These parts hold specific memories, beliefs, and emotional tones. When triggered by a current event, the emotion experienced often belongs to a past, in quotations, part that has stepped forward to protect or express itself, even if the conscious self does not recognize it as such. Thus, the present self may feel the emotion, but the source of the emotion is often a past version of the self with unresolved emotional logic. Wow. Wow. Guys, this explains it. The issue is there isn't emotional logic. That means if you suddenly find yourself in an emotional moment where you're confused, that explains it, that you have a past memory of yourself where the emotional logic, like there wasn't an emotional logic to it. Do you know, imagine you go and give someone a nice gift and they suddenly say fuck you, do you know, and show you the middle finger. Do you know what I mean? It's as if it didn't match the emotional logic. So the next time when you want to give a gift to someone, you just quickly give the gift and leave. Do you know what I mean? So it's like it. So guys, what's going on planet is the opening of a new dimension of therapy. I am so happy to notice this. Like, you don't understand at least for me, what I've discovered right now. It's like a chunk. It's like it's like parts of the world. It's like I've been living and processing myself as an individual, but now I understand, oh my God, the reason in certain areas I am damaged is because the emotional logic didn't go through. It was like I've experienced moments where I couldn't the emotion wasn't logical. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, imagine you're expressing yourself for the first time as a human being and somebody says, you know, stop talking. Do you know what I mean? And then you wonder why you hate people from Jersey. I'm joking, I'm joking. Hey. You know, and then you become more Canadian. Ladies and gentlemen, I am telling you that I have just learned. You know, I'm more excited about what I've learned than what I'm telling you. Is that, wow, what an explanation. I'll just read this last sentence again. Thus, this is in regards to internal family systems and emotional subpersonalities. The present self may feel the emotion, but the source of the emotion is often a past version of the self with unresolved emotional logic. This, like, am I the only one just getting goosebumps from reading this? Am I the only one present in my own live stream? See, for example, like, you know, I've been giving talks for decades, and, you know, usually when I give a talk, like in the live stream max, like, you know, it gets to, like, it's from like 1 to 10 people who you know, join in. And I guess I do give off this vibe that I'm not really asking people to kind of connect with my identity. I'm asking them to connect with the ideas. So they have to. So if you feel the ideas of these talks are way more important than the speaker, I have succeeded. I'm successful. Then, you know, you should. I'm telling you. Anyways, guys, I'm gonna keep reading this. So 4. Philosophical accounts of the fragmented or fluid self. And guys, this is an AI generated essay on this I'm reading. Philosophers like Hume, Parfit, and Dennett challenge the notion of a singular, unchanging self. Oh my God, you know. Instead, the self is seen as a bundle of experiences, stories, and perceptual continuity. The experience of identity, guys, even what they're saying doesn't make sense, because what is aware of the bundle? The experience of identity is narrative, not ontological. Okay, that's what they're saying. Emotions then do not arise from a true self, but from context-specific configurations of past interpretations. Yeah, you know, I've always thought about it that when I remember a memory from like 10 years ago, am I changing the memory by adding an extension to it by now? Like imagine, like, in my youth, I climbed a tree. If now I remember that memory, am I adding to that memory? Am I modifying the memory? That's a good question that comes. Five, the spiritual and phenomenological witness. Despite the fragmentation of the self, many spiritual traditions from Islamic Ruh to Vedantic Atman propose a stable underlying witness or observer consciousness. This, in quotations, witness self is not emotionally reactive, but instead aware of all emotional states. In phenomenological terms, it is the intentionality of consciousness, the unchanging capacity to notice change. What an incredible way of saying it, yeah. The unchanging capacity to notice change. All right, now we get to the conclusion. Emotions experienced in the present moment often originate from emotional configurations formed in earlier psychological states. The self is not singular but composed of a layered architecture of subselves, each capable of generating emotion based on historical experiences. Neuroscience confirms the reconstructive nature of emotional experience, while psychotherapeutic frameworks like IFS help map these emotional origins. However, a deep phenomenological layer, the witness, may serve as the stable reference point that transcends the emotional fluctuations of past selves. Now it says, key sentence summary. The modern academic consensus suggests that emotions arise in the present, but often originate from subpersonalities formed in past experiences, meaning that what we call the self is a dynamic system of layered emotional identities, with the only consistent self being the conscious witness behind them. So, guys, after this, I asked AI, what is the most academic explanation of what is happening when someone is being emotional? AI says, when someone is being emotional, they're experiencing the activation of a specific affective neural circuit, typically triggered by a stimulus that their brain associates consciously or unconsciously with a past experience. This activation involves the limbic system, especially the amygdala, hippocampus, and hypothalamus, which processes threat, memory, and internal states. Simultaneously, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for regulation and reflective judgment, may be downregulated, reducing the person's ability to contextualize or modulate their response. According to constructivist emotion theory, the brain is using past emotional patterns and conceptual knowledge to predict and simulate what the body should feel in the current moment. In the internal family systems, IFS or schema-based models, this emotional state often reflects the, in quotations, blending of a past subpersonality or emotional part with the present identity, resulting in a disproportionate or persistent affect. What appears externally as, in quotations, being emotional is, in fact, a complex integration of somatic activation, memory-based prediction, and identity fusion, often without conscious awareness of the origin of the emotion. And then what I read for you at the beginning, in simpler terms, when someone is being emotional, their brain is reactivating a past emotional response to a present situation, blending past identity states with current perception, while reducing the brain's capacity to rationally separate then from now. So guys, I think I have a picture of it. Like I can see the film in my mind to explain it to you. So I'm happy actually I read this first. So see, ladies and gentlemen, we want to study. Imagine right now, you were fascinated by the medical sciences and you wanted to understand the human body. Okay? Now, it's not as easy as to just look at the human body from the outside and be like, "Yo, man, that's how the human body is." Do you know? That's what it is. Do you know, that's we've understood everything. No need to go to med school, by just seeing the outside of something. So we got pretty much what I'm saying is you have to wonder about the surface of something, the concept, and the depth of it, the context. The the exoteric dimension, the surface, the esoteric dimension, the depth. Okay? So now we want to kind of look at a human being and wonder about, okay, when they go to different situations, and we are a biosocial entity, so when this human being goes to these different states or different situations in society and it activates as a human being, what aspect, what about it, or what is going on consciously to it, and what is going on unconsciously for it, right? We have to wonder about that to some degree. Okay, you got to treat yourself like an iceberg where a majority of you is underwater and you're pretty much in this life to uncover it. As Carl Jung said, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So we're here to make the unconscious conscious. Human beings have been living on Earth for some time, and based on 2025 right now, we want to see what about this is unconscious that we can make conscious. For me personally, reading the thing I read for you, some things have become conscious for me. But I said I want to explain this. So I either have to direct a new scene or use myself. So let's say it this way. I mean, I wanted to get into it, but it would be a little too Freudian. Um, okay, I'll give you an example. Imagine, I'm thinking about the older generations, and back in the day, right? And there were like my grandfather, my grandparents, they like hit their kids. It was normal, like, and I wondered for the longest time, why was it, were people just more fucked up? And then I realized no. There's an argument where they're like, if you don't discipline your child, society will discipline your child. So the father, rather the son get hit at home and learn its lesson. I mean, domestic abuse is wrong, by the way, but I'm saying now we can have intellectual conversations more. But I'm saying that, let's look at it. So for my father's generation, my grandfather definitely was hit by his father. Like physically hit without, like, that much of a filter. My grandfather, hit my parents, but with a filter. My parents didn't hit me. Do you know? But I've come to realize subconscious. Anyways, I don't want to get into that. That's another talk. Okay, but what I'm trying to get to is that now, for a person, now I don't want to get into genetical memory. That's like next level. But like I just want to say, from my father's perspective, his father, like as a child being born, right? So his view of the archetype of the father was that the father is someone who disciplines. Do you know? Usually they say in the family dynamic, the mothers, keep this in mind, this is something very important for anybody who's a single parent. Okay, the father's job is in some sense to teach the child discipline and about the conditions of life. The role of the mother is to be a sort of beacon of unconditional love. Now the issue is if the father's not home and the mother's just raising the kids, or if it's a single mom, or if it's a single dad, right? So they have to kind of play both parts at the same time, which is very weird because they have to, in some sense, be a sort of like, and they have to care about, they have to bring ethics, they have to enforce ethics, but at the same time they have to show care. And this is very difficult. If you're a single parent, you should probably go find quickly another parent rather than doing both things yourself, right? Because you don't understand, every moment that passes by is the formation of your children's memories. Okay, now of course there's so many variations, so many different circumstances, so many conditions. Some people don't have a choice, some people are in a messed up situation, some people haven't found the right person. But I'm just trying to say, like, it's very important when you wonder about the development of a human being in regards to wondering about what sort of alphabet of archetypes was introduced to them. That, like, we have 26 letters in the alphabet, we have 600,000 words, arising from those 26 letters. So similarly, what could be a sort of alphabet of archetypes that this human being has, which in some sense leads to all the different senses of self they can express? And sometimes I'm even fascinated that, we might have thought like, all right, man, like, for example, me, I've lived 33 years on this planet. That's around like 12,000 days on this planet. Now, imagine like someone living 12,000 days, 12,000 new days. It's as if how many of senses of self that arose, that emerged from my consciousness identified with, how many of those senses of self are just based on an alphabet of values? It's like I'm saying, imagine like your personality is a sentence or it's a word, okay? And it's made of these letters, right? So I'm pretty much wondering, like, how many values was I introduced to, or how many different archetypes was I introduced to, that I had to use these to kind of come up with, I had to use these letters to come up with different words, okay? Now the thing I'm going to go back to the example of saying, like, my great grandfather, like, my grandfather's lucky he didn't, my okay, I'm saying the warrior spirit in parenting was a little bit much, or I shouldn't say that. For every time, there's a beautiful prayer that Muslims, it's from Surah Al-Baqarah, in the Holy Quran, which I treat as source code, and I treat God as the system admin beyond the world room. There's a saying where it says, God, don't burden me with a problem that you haven't given me the ability to go through. Something in those lines. Okay? Now, I feel at every time, every generation, every person's born, you come with a preparation. In the same way you see a baby deer is born and just knows how to run already. I feel like the experiences we go through, something in us has kind of made us capable of accessing that. Okay? But anyways, so going back to the point, my grandfather beat my father, but my father didn't beat his kids. Now, I want to just for a second take you to the perspective of my father, like position of my father. Now, my father had the archetype that, a father has to be strict and discipline their child, right? But when he came to his own child, the culture had evolved, right? Where the parent was just like treating, like, sorry to say this, but women and children were pretty much treated like assets. Like, how do I say it? They were more like, I gotta be very careful, how I walk on this thin ice. But I'm trying to tell you, like, the further you go back in history, the less women and children had freedom to express as agents of change in the moment. Okay? Do you know that it was kind of like they were followers of the male force, but it doesn't mean, like, nations haven't had queens. Queen Victoria was a badass, like, giving a speech telling, the soldiers to be lions or something, So anyways, where I'm going with this is, my father received an archetype of what it means to be a father, okay, which is to discipline your child physically. But in his time, okay, he didn't, even though that archetype could have existed in his psyche, right? But he didn't activate it. So he understood the unresolved emotional logic of there being no reason actually for a parent to like release their emotions on their child. Do you know, like go hit a punching bag? Do you know what I mean? But in matters of discipline, that's a different topic. I mean, it's this is I don't know. I'm just trying to find an example here to share it with you, right? I'm pretty much saying unresolved logic makes the person kind of not know what to do. Okay, so if in my youth, do you know what I mean? Let's say I saw a beautiful girl, I went up to her and I'm like, hey, how are you doing? And she's like, you know, she behaved very rudely or something. Do you know what I mean? It was as if a sort of unresolved emotional logic. You know, like what? Do you know what was the issue? It's as if you never know. Do you know? It's like, you know, I think women could do a huge favor for like half the species by letting them know. You know, it's like the whole thing is about feedback, really. You know, and what our blind spots are, because in some sense everybody has blind spots. You know, who like if you stay with someone, if you get to know someone long enough, you begin to see who they truly are. I firmly believe this because they can't fake it that long. Do you know what I mean? You eventually, the nature of the person comes out over time. Do you know? But anyways, going back to this, pretty much I'm saying, like, from my father's perspective, it was as if like he was introduced to a father in that role, but he didn't choose to be a father like that. Okay? And so perhaps sometimes these the unresolved emotional logic of situations we go through, I think that it kind of restores by, how do I say it? Like I'm looking at myself right now and I'm wondering, why was I so introverted and shy when I was young? Like, why was that even necessary? Now I understand it, but like back then I wondered why. What was causing that? Right? What was causing like someone from a very young age to dislike being themselves? You know, not dislike being themselves, not trusting themselves, and therefore not being able to trust others, and therefore not being capable of connection. You know? And of course, you know, the burdens of our decisions are on ourselves. You know, you could be someone where you could be around people, but really what it is I don't know how I feel like maybe I'm a savage in this, right? Because I have I have never cared about others caring about my emotions. And I think it's mainly because I didn't really care about my emotions, because somebody's like, Mr. Within, are you doing therapy on yourself right now? I'll be like, no, guys, I'm just trying to figure out, you know, why I live the way I live, and why that was my conclusion. Why did I conclude that I was not worthy of expressing myself as a being, right? And what can I do with the damage of that? You know what that means? That means, think of children being raised in this world, and they have different they learn languages, right? For example, me, I'm bilingual, you know. So a human being learns languages. Now, these languages are just not limited to the languages we speak. The child learns mathematics. The child learns an emotional language. Do you know what that means? Something, you know, pain means tears. Do you know what? Do you know, somebody in tears means they're experiencing some sort of pain? Do you know? So it's like I didn't it's like I missed it. I honestly feel this, that I some part of me felt so unimportant, which was very strange because, you see, I when I say I was introverted and shy, not when I had to speak, okay? Just it was one of those things where, you know, this might, I feel I didn't learn an emotional language when I was young, right? And at some point, I found myself as if feeling. I wouldn't say it's not like I don't have. It's not like I don't have emotions. I'm saying that the emotions didn't translate to what they had to. Do you know what I mean? That means I'm remembering like very early memories. I'm probably like 11 years old or something, you know? And I remember I would go into situations and people would speak, right? And a part of me wanted to communicate, but I would just smile and be quiet and watch the moment go forth. It's as if I don't know, maybe up to now, in these 12,000 days I've been living here, I am actually shocking myself by how little I have even thought about my emotions. Do you know what I mean? It's like a language that I'm learning late. Do you know? But at the same time, it's not that I don't have empathy. It's not that because I've been raised around human beings, you know? And also I don't say I pride myself on this, but I what tends to happen to you when you're shy and introverted is that you gain an ego-like precision of observance. You notice things. That means imagine like from the educational system from the beginning to the end of high school, I was so closed off that I don't really know if people ever understood what my personality was. But do you know, I don't even know if people knew who I was. You know, I was like kind of, living like a statue at the corner of the room. Do you know? But like, you know what I think right now, what I realize, I feel like I couldn't, the emotional logic of my earlier experiences were a little messed up. That made me kind of being like, okay, you got to normalize something, right? And I think I normalized not treating myself as an emotional entity. That means if that means like, I'm thinking about this now. If somebody asks me, hey man, how do you see yourself in the future? Very little I'm thinking about how I'm feeling. Do you know what I'm saying? That means if I ask you, hey man, what does your future look like? You don't say it feels like this. Do you know what I'm saying? So I haven't really thought about my emotional evolution as a being, even though like it's obviously happened, in the same way, like I would say I have my emotional language was very, there was nobody to come and like shake me. Do you know what I mean? And it was my own fault because I was acting like there was nothing wrong to fit in, but there was something wrong emotionally with me. Do you know? And I ignored it. And years later in emotional situations, I was like, yo, man, why am I like, dumbfounded? Why am I not like, why does it feel like emotionally I was born yesterday? They're like, yo, man, he's so emotionally youthful. You know what I mean? But honestly, no, guys. I've seen the suffering of reality. I've come to a conclusion of what's happening in this existential situation. And honestly, what I'm trying to tell you is that you can't, to some degree, you can't fake the core programming, your core emotional programming. Like in the same way you can't fake your fears. You can't say like you're afraid of heights and then go run on a pole, between two skyscrapers. So anyways, the important thing is to become aware of our blind spots as humans. Okay? And I'm using myself as an example. I didn't need to, but why not? And so, I could even come up with different examples. Right now, like I've been giving talks for a while. If somebody tells me, hey, how do you feel about giving a talk? I would say I've reached an emotional boredom. That means it's like the feeling of giving a talk it normalizes after some point. Anything you pretty much do normalizes. Like if every day you're fighting with a sword, after some point it's gonna be normal to you, you know? Do you know? Do you know? So whatever you're doing as a human being, you're normalizing. Therefore, it translates as every decision you make is creating a memory for your future self to get influenced by. Right now, there are human beings way more emotionally sophisticated than me, of course. But as as someone with whatever level my emotional understanding is, the biggest thing that I've realized, legit, even from reading this right now, is that I have to wonder about the logic of my emotions. And emotions are not logical. Do you know, like somebody getting angry at the wrong person is not logical, but to them, the emotion possesses them. And at the same time, imagine, somebody, is shy and introverted, and suddenly somebody comes and talks to them. Do you know what I mean? It's as if then they have a sort of, the logic can't process. It's as if the person has this feeling, I've been soloing it for years. Do you know what I mean? Why now should someone care? That means it would be weird. Do you know what I mean? Rather than normal. So I'm saying what you normalize could be not normal and could make the normal feel weird to you. I think I explained that pretty well. Do you know what I mean? Like honestly, I feel I explained that really well. But anyways, where I'm going with this is how important are our emotions, and how important is unresolved emotional logic based on our past sub-selves. Okay, now if somebody's like, all right man, what's your actual, you probably know my view, but my view is that there is an awareness underlying the whole human intelligence that is aware of how objects and subjects have changed. Now, I also do consider that it's not like, even though yesterday is gone, for your mind, it's not. Do you know what a memory means? A memory means the past is still alive now. Okay? So the body maybe a self-identifying primarily with the body, may be like, yo man, the past is gone. But if the mind can remember yesterday, how is it gone for the mind? Like, take that in. The past is gone for your body. The physical past doesn't exist anymore. But your mind, which is taking copy pasting the outer models into objective models into subjective models. Like, isn't that interesting? Doesn't it fascinate you that our body is not in the past, but our mind's like, nah, I'm going to hold on to this moment. It's like, I didn't feel that good in this moment. I'm going to hold on to this years later, so it messes me up. Oh, man. Now, a person can extract emotions from different things. So it is a very deeper, like, it's a deep topic, okay? I'm just, I guess, touching the surface of it. But right now, the way I look at it, I'm like, okay, I've had an objective life, I've had a subjective life, I've had an emotional life, and all of these have been factors of change in the life of my awareness on changing awareness to the changing world. So truly, what is the depth of this? And the thing I wanted to say, this emotional logic thing kind of took all my attention, took most of my attention, but I'll tell you the thing I wanted to say. I wanted to say emotions. Sorry guys, give me a few minutes. Okay, back to it, guys. Sorry about that. All right, let's change the song. There's way more. I could feel it. There's like so much more depth left to uncover. All right, what's a good song here? All right, this is nice. This works. So, guys, what I was trying to say is, for me, the future is very important. And I got to explain it to you in this way that yo, I'm just waiting for one of the viewers to write a comment like, hey, can you not give a talk near a train station? It's not a train station, guys. It's these tracks that pass, right beside the place I live. Or maybe you can't even hear it at all, who knows? So see, guys, the thing I wanted to say is that I have come to the conclusion that the educational system's trying to teach you the past. You're kind of responsible for the present, but technically everybody's living for the future. They're living for a future self, and they're living for a future world, okay? Or for a future state. Now, in these 12,000 days, like, of just waking up being like, another new day, another new self, another new meaning to everything, you know. And after 12,000 days, guys, you get bored. Like, some stuff loops. Like, you start noticing how much of reality is kind of like maintained by looping, and how much of actually not just existing and living is based on the discovery of novelty. So for me, the honest answer is, as a soul, I am bored. I am bored with the past, and I'm bored with the present. And I'm bored to the present because I have certain incapabilities, you know. I'm not where I truly wanted to be at this age. And, you know, kind of like a soldier that goes through a battlefield, you know, and gets scars, you know, and gets damaged, you know. Similarly, it hasn't been a battlefield, but in this, like, 33 laps around the sun, the consciousness, that means you don't know. Some, like, in some sense, some scars kind of fade and some scars remain, right? So anyways, where I'm going with this is, we're talking about emotions, we're talking about emotional states, we're talking about, I'm telling you that I'm kind of bored of the past to present just leading to the definition of man. And actually, the mind has access to the future, to probabilities of the future. Like, behind your eye, like in front of your eyes, I'm not inside a flying car, but behind my eyes, I can imagine this car like 100 meters in the air. You know, it's like I'm saying, if someone comes and speaks, let's say someone comes and does something rude to me. Or here, let's say the opposite. Let's say somebody comes and gives me a compliment. Now I have to ask myself, how do I feel about this compliment? Okay? Let's say somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey man, you talk a lot." You know, it's like, so now I have to in some sense ask myself, okay, what sort of emotional logic am I going to use to process that statement? Okay? So let's say let's say the person comes and says, let's just say compliment, just to make it easier so I don't have to say the sentence, repeat it. So somebody comes and tells me a compliment, okay? Now, what can I do? Like a video game, I have choices, okay? And also, we can make the argument that subconsciously something happens immediately when you see someone, or whenever they communicate to you. That means, like, sometimes when I've communicated to people, or when any living being has approached me, sometimes I feel like my brain's processing it as like the different alphabet of archetypes is that it has. Like, that means in the moment, like, let's say, you know, I went to, what was it called? I traveled to India for 3 months, you know, and I went there alone, staying in an ashram. And this was before I completely shifted from no longer being a spiritual person like that. But, okay, I'm deviating. If somebody comes and gives me a compliment, the logic is there's 3 senses of self we can think of that can relate to that, okay? So someone comes and says the compliment. Now I can feel, like, the feeling that comes to me can be based on my past self. I'm like, yo, nobody's ever said anything. What is this? You know, I don't even know how to process this. You know, and there is, so for example, there's that. It's from the past. So in my past self, you know, I was, you know, there was nobody there. So when somebody comes in new, it's like, is my past self, like, is my brain being like, yo man, you know, what I'm saying is, any emotional moment, let's say it's a comparison of a present self to a past self, or to a memory. Now I'm trying to make the argument that it can also be based on a visualization, which is your future self. So if somebody comes and says something to me, let's say I get a feeling based on who I was in the past and what they're saying. How does that make me feel now? Like the image they create in my mind. And then I could also be, somebody could be like, I'll give you an example. I'll go back to the thing I said. Somebody comes and tells me I talk a lot, and I could go based on a past emotion and feel like, oh my God, people are finally seeing, this inner self I was this whole time. I could have that, or I could just be like, somebody could be like, you talk a lot, and I'll be like, not enough. I could base it on the image I have of a future self that I actually have a feeling for. Like, you don't understand. I give these talks as a human, in a biological human position, but the inner realms is unavoidable. Like, I could be sitting here and talking about like lettuce, okay, and suddenly in my inner realms I get a vision of like how, in the future, do you know what I mean, human beings may no longer even need to eat food, do you know what I mean? So what I'm telling you is, like, suddenly, at least for me, an image arises. The image generates an emotion. So you could kind of think that what I'm doing in these talks is that I'm trying to visualize that I'm some part of me is somehow visualizing the future, okay, and I'm basing the comparison of the emotional logic based on the future self to the present self, not based on the past self to the present self. There we go, I said it. So what I'm saying is that I think this is what emotional maturity really is. The reason why my father, let's say his father hit him, why my father didn't hit me. Do you know what I mean? That means he reorganized the illogical emotion of the past with the logic of where is it now going. Do you know what I mean? That means that should I create a memory where my child is scared of me? Should I create a memory for my child where my child is scared of me? Or should I, in some sense, create a memory where, in some sense, this is a very tough this is a very tough topic, guys, because I can see arguments for why the introduction of intensity to the child's consciousness is necessary. Like, I had the privilege of having a twin brother, which means it's like someone that looks like you that is fighting with you all the time. Do you know? So anyways, guys, what I'm trying to say is that it's up to us. I think that we have a certain capacity to choose to how to value ourselves. And the valuation of self it tends to be between a past self and a present self. So if I ask you right now, how are you feeling? Like, check this out. If somebody tells me something about my past, yeah, it's a past emotion. But if somebody tells me, how do you feel about like Sky Cities 600 years from now, as you've predicted, will suddenly lift up into the sky, I would be like what I'm trying to tell you is that you're an intelligence that externally doesn't make sense how, but internally it does make sense that the mind is actually generating time. It is not limited to time, in the way that the mind in the present can remember the past self. Okay, now the thing is, though, the mind can also visualize a future self. And I think this kind of explains why some people go to the gym and they stop, and some people, or in anything, why some people endure and why some people fail. If your emotion is based on the past, if you want to just prove the past wrong, you're not going to have that endurance, okay? Because you haven't even thought about your emotion of the future. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've reached that point where I don't have kids, and I keep telling myself, like, it's because there's something wrong with you. But it's, I have reached that age where I am wondering about emotions of futuristic situations of my own, relatable futuristic situations of my own life. Do you know what I mean? Like, how would I feel, for example, if my kid, if my, let's say my son in the future started smoking cigarettes? Do you know? Would I go there? Would I go there and in some sense be like, son, you're hurting yourself, don't do this? Or would I, in some sense, just the moment I see a cigarette in his hand, just slap him across the face, gently, but slap him across the face? And I'll be like, remember, attach this pain. Do you know what? Do you know what I mean? But probably like my son's gonna be like, you know, you're coughing, and you know, my children are gonna, you know, I was a soul that somehow, I don't know. I guess smoke was part of my destiny. Do you know what I mean? But what I'm trying to say is that the way I treat myself, do you know, or sometimes the way I expect to be treated, does not fall into the emotional logic, you know, of what I would actually do. See, sometimes I feel that they say you should, in situations, you should consciously act, you shouldn't react. Okay? But sometimes when we react to a situation, it's like the emotion is limited. It's like it's based on a lower emotional logic. So a reaction is like is based on a lower level logic than in some sense consciously looking at something. That means maybe I did something that my father wanted to hit me like how his father hit him. But there was something else in his mind that fathomed the, let's say, considered the future, and you know, he didn't do that. Now, why would I, as someone who my parents didn't hit me, why would I, for example, hit my, you know, let's say, you know, 20-year-old son in the future who's smoking for the first time? Do you know what I mean? Because the reason I would do it is because I would probably try to show it's very difficult to wonder if, you know, like Machiavelli, who wrote this book called The Prince, and in that book, in the foreword, said, I deserve to be of the noble, of the royal class, but I wasn't born as one, but I have the awareness of it. So, and then he wrote this book called The Prince, which was for all princes. Like pretty much if you're a king, you would give that, you would read that book. And it talks about, like, you know, I don't remember everything from it, but it shares this idea that, for example, Machiavelli is saying that a prince should first rule with fear for the first year, you know, and then, you know, be peaceful later. Do you know what I mean? Something like that. So it's very difficult. I mean, I guess this is something I'm still thinking about, but I'm trying to communicate that sometimes somebody may do something and they don't know how to value it because they haven't experienced it. You know, that's kind of the role of, like, if I see, like, you know, if I see my children shy, do you know what I mean? Or who knows, you know, I might try. It's crazy how when you look back at your own life, you could teach what you learned from your own mistakes to others. It's crazy. Because you get to see the blind spots you had back then, which you don't now, for example. You know, in my own life, you know, I did reach the conclusion that in communication, especially in relationships, don't have any expectation, you know, kind of, they say let them be theory, you know, but at the same time, I've come to understand that human beings don't want to understand each other. They're just like looking for archetypes that will activate their archetype. People may act honest, they may even feel honest, but it doesn't mean they are conditioned to behave honest. Okay, there is deeper programming. You know, we are in an existential system. Your ego code is your limited program. It's like there's a box over every person's head, and their task in this life is to kind of, you know, take off this box and then realize, oh my God, we're all inside a box now. I thought I was in a box alone. I thought reality was my own simulation, but now we're all in a box. And then in some sense, what's beyond this box? You know, consciousness is unboxing the depth of manifestation, or the depth of unconscious manifestation consciously, right? What really human life is like you're opening doors that you don't know what's behind. And sometimes See, it's all about identity. You know, if something, if let's say, I'll give you an example. Let's say me and a group of like important people are talking, you know, one day, let's say, you know, and suddenly one of them, I don't know, says something, teases me or something that makes me go back to the, somehow tell that person's statement teleports me back to a vulnerable time where I felt shy. Do you know what I mean? Then in that situation, my protocol is based on that emotion. Do you understand what I'm telling you guys? I'm telling you guys, your actions are not just based on your free will. They are based on how anyone comes and says anything, it teleports you to, like, your brain's trying to familiarize. It's like, yo, man, this thing that this person's saying to me, you know, how can I understand it? I got to see what it's familiar to. Do you know? So it may suddenly, do you understand what I'm saying? That means I'm realizing that I have to be very conscious that when people speak to me, they're actually teleporting me to past senses of self that may have had, emotional, unresolved emotional logic, or were illogical moments. So this is, I don't know, guys. I don't know if this stuff I'm saying has been like, is new. Like I'm kind of like discovering it, or what it is exactly. But I'm honestly telling you, be very conscious, right? It be like, and in the sense that, how are people teleporting you, right? And that's really what communication is. At least for me, when one of my hobbies is I just do chores, you know, and while I do chores, I put on a lecture, and I have this view that the distraction, you know, if the lecture is going to distract me from my chores, so at least I'm going to learn the lectures. You know what I mean? Even though I don't get distracted from my chores, and I go into this kind of like local, non-local state of mind, it's like my ears are in another room, and then my body and mind and eyes are in a different room. But, you know, kind of like what you deal with as someone having a visual mind is that anything anybody says turns into an image, right? It translates into an image. So if you come and say, you know, I had a bad day, I'm visualizing you in like a bad situation. It's not even me visualizing it, just the imagery builds up that way, right? You know, and a lot of people, I've realized, like, you know, I think I need to have a tag, like, yo guys, I'm a visual learner, you know, and any word you say will appear as an image to me. Do you know what I'm saying? This is why too much rudeness is going to be like disgusting to me. Do you know what I mean? or if somebody explains a situation, my logic is based on not the words they say, it's based on the scenario they've painted in my inner realms, which then my logic is based on seeing a film. Do you know what I mean? That means if somebody comes and says, hey, you know, what's going on tomorrow? Or like, hey man, you know, I bought a new car or something, right? You know, and let's say I don't see that car. Okay, so my mind is gonna envision them in a new car. Now, the difference is if you go to and tell someone, see, the issue I think with human beings being incapable of communicating at fast speeds is because they're reacting to they're responding to the language protocol rather than allowing the language to be a film. Okay, that means when I close let's say somebody's like, hey man, you got an hour, you got to listen to this lecture, you know, and that's it, right? I would close my eyes if I really wanted to really like listen to someone. I would have to close my eyes, and I will have to go into my inner space and feel free there, and then witness how their communication animates. Do you know what I mean? That means your mind must have an ability, like some people don't have, some people may not have cultivated this ability yet, that when you say something, so I'll give you an example. I've had conversations with people where I was saying like, and they're conscious and completely listening, and I was saying like, yeah man, you know, there's times that I'm like this, and in their mind it's like They didn't even care like what I was saying, how I'm talking about me. In their mind, what I said animated in from their own inner realms, and they thought I was saying that about them. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you could be talking about yourself, but the other person, their subconscious may not be able to tell apart. Is this person saying that I am this or they are this? Do you know? Guys, I feel like a next level explorer. But at the same time, I do believe that nobody's perfect. And who was it? What's his name? Sadi. I don't know if it was Sadi, Omar Khayyam, Attar. I don't know which one it was. But one of these poets said, if you want a friend that's flawless, you will be friendless. So part of the responsibility of the modern human being is to give themselves the patience to not react to what is being communicated initially. You know, Aristotle said it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. I'm trying to tell you that there are some human beings that can't discriminate between the inner realms and outer realms. When you communicate to them, they think what you're saying is them. So then they have to, their past self, unresolved emotional logic of their past self comes into collision with now, right? Do you know? So you have to be very conscious, because let me say what I mean. Human beings on this planet, they're making decisions all the time, and these decisions are based, we say, on rationality or irrationality. The irrationality is the emotion. So right now on this planet, everybody's making decisions. Their decisions are either emotional, and that emotion could be based on a past self or a future self, you know, based on a memory or a visualization. And in some sense,
okay, thank you. That worked out good.
Yeah. All right.
See ya.
I'm trying to convey that I have said it from the beginning, that the inability to discriminate between your inner life and outer life is the biggest cause of mental instability, which we treat as mental illness. Okay, and the human beings aren't trained into this. You know, they're not trained in this. Like if I started a school, I would start training the inner realms of the future generations in such a next level way. You know, like you don't understand, because if I had a classroom, the kid that would daydream, every kid would be quiet. Do you know, like there would be two classrooms. Everybody would leave that classroom and go to another classroom. Why? Because it's like what happens behind your eyes is very important. When you're young, you don't think it's important. When you get really old, you think it was never important from the beginning. But it's about the synchronization of your inner life with your outer life. If I'm in a moment and there's other people, if I don't care for the future of those people, I most likely don't have an emotion on them. Do you know what I mean? Or if I don't care, if I don't know anything about the past of that person, you know, I won't care, you know. And really what human beings struggle with is an ability to convey themselves. But what are they conveying? Are they conveying the emotions of now? Are they basing their identity based on a future value of themselves, based on a past value of themselves, based on the value the person communicating to them is giving them? What are we basing it on? And really, what is the depth of this? So anyways, guys, I hope this lecture was interesting. I am still looking into this. I am someone who is trying to catch up very quickly and try to figure out all my emotional blind spots and kind of, you know, reverse the emotional illogical moments in my past, you know, or even the emotions of the logic of certain moments, you know. Like if I wanted to give 100,000 talks, that wouldn't be possible as a biological organism. Do you know what I mean? like actual vocal talks, you know, or even written talks, but still that will be vocalized years later, you know, maybe after my death, you know. But what I'm saying is, the whole point of it is, I'm saying, unless the talks are like a second each. I mean, sure, like a couple seconds, like, oh man, I recorded a talk. All right, next one. Another, okay, I recorded another lecture. They're like, this guy recorded 10,000 talks, but a majority of them are like 10 seconds long, and there's barely any sound. You know what I mean? But it's a lecture. But honestly, guys, I've really tried to put in my effort, because the purpose of the talks is not the talks. It's not about like some dude giving lectures. It's about the advancement of civilization while we're here. Anyways, guys, I hope this was a good talk for you. I'm going to kind of summarize some points I took away from it. They're like, yo, man, this guy's such a good listener. He even listens to himself when he speaks, you know. To see if it worked out good. I understood that, holy shit, this whole time as a human being, I might have normalized certain ways of being and limited my emotional access to reality. You know, I might have had moments in my past, you know, where the emotional logic of that situation was not resolved. You don't understand. This was the huge addition to me. Do you know that I'm realizing every situation had an emotional logic? It wasn't just a body and a thought. There was an emotional logic there, you know? And is the true identity of the being beyond these elements that change in the system, you know, in the conscious view? That means, am I my past self? Am I this self now? Am I my future self? Or am I using systems thinking, the whole thing, aware of all the elements moving within my awareness? Right? And of course, I'm also Muslim, and when it comes to emotions, I could say this, that in Islam we have the 99 names of God. These are, like, technically, for a Muslim, the 99 divine attributes of manifestation. Okay, so in some sense, being a Muslim is not that you're just a human being. You're a Khalifa. You're an ambassador of the system admin, in the sense that you have system admin privileges that if you activate in this life, you in some sense usher the lower worlds to kind of move up. Okay? And I want you to think that, imagine, instead of human beings born on Earth, they were just born on this tree, this endless tree that endlessly goes to the top of the sky, and pretty much you were born at the bottom of the tree and you're climbing. And somebody let's say 50 years old, right? Or let's say somebody 10 years old has climbed it a little bit. Somebody 20 years old has climbed it a little bit higher. Somebody 30 years old has climbed it a little higher, you know, and therefore has a completely different, sees more, right? And somebody who's like 40 years old has climbed a bit higher. Somebody who's 50 years old has climbed higher. Somebody who's climbed, let's say 90 years, they've reached a point where they don't really need to climb. They've understood the meaning of the tree of life, I think. You know, if I'm an old man and, you know, I cannot position, like, I honestly don't, it's very weird. I don't have a feeling of myself as an old person. I see visions of myself, like, you know, in my inner realms, like, you know, maybe these belong to another parallel, you know. I don't know if these are, like, I don't, like, we haven't even gotten transcendental about emotional states, but I don't want to make it too metaphysical. I want to say that it's just, this whole lecture has just made me fascinated. Hey man, be conscious of your emotions, like what you're feeling now. Is it based on you in the past? Is it based on you in the future? Do you have an unresolved emotional logic about who you were in the past? Do you have an unresolved emotional logic about who you will be in the future? You know? And more and more in life, I'm realizing, more than life is you trying to be an idea and then just doing something, it's about an awareness of how things are done. There's a beauty in watching efficiency happen, or watching something happen. You know, I think human beings are fascinated by activity. And so it's all the different kinds of activity. It's like we're studying physical activity. Now I call that the outer realms, what you see in front of your eyes. We're studying subjective activity. That belongs to your inner realms, behind your eyes. We're studying emotional activity. Do you know what I mean? That also belongs to your inner realms. Also, of course, to your body. I mean, like you feel pain. There's loss. There's gain. These make human beings emotional. Somebody winning a lottery, you know, they get emotional. Somebody losing, their lottery money gets emotional. Do you know what I mean? But on some level, I feel like this is my true feeling. I'm telling you, right now, we are here to perform for some time. Because I see it as simulated, it means like okay, so if you ask me, hey man, how are you being a human being? I'm like, that word is vague. In the sense that what I'm considering to be me is a biological simulation for 100 years. It's a cosmic simulation for however years it is gone. The cosmos is what, 13.8 billion years old? However long that will go. So it's like a cosmic simulation. Then there's like a planetary simulation. Planet's been around what, 4.5 billion years or something, you know? So do you see what I'm saying? I'm saying that it's like I'm an awareness to multiple simulations that have come into a point of commonality in accordance to my where I want to go as a being. And if somebody says to me, hey man, are you giving these talks based on just how you feel or based on a role? Are you doing this because there's an archetype you're trying to fulfill in your lifetime? And I'll be like, the answer is yeah. That means the content of the talks comes based on me suddenly seeing something in my inner realms and that activating an emotion that is the emotion. Like right now, the emotion that's like the energy that's guiding me right now is based on how fascinated I am based on what I see. Okay, but at the same time, being a human being is kind of being a specific design, which means you are limited to roles. So you have a role in regards to like surviving as an entity. And, I have selected as a human being that I would rather have my lifetime not just be a service to myself, but a service to something bigger than myself. Anyways, have you wondered about Have you wondered if your emotions are from your past self or your present self or even your future self? And the answer is yeah. Now that you've listened to this lecture, you've wondered about it. Thank you for listening, guys. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful.